Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And greetings for a Happy New Year. Thank you for this opportunity to share of my life and how God has walked with me, journeyed with me for the last 64 years. So I'm 64 years old. I'm a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and a psychotherapist. Now, let me start from the beginning, because God has always been part of my life. How did I be born? How did I be a Malaysian? It was because my grandfather, who was from Kerala, got a post as a headmaster in the northern state of Kedah in Malaysia. So he was the headmaster of St. Michael's School, a Catholic school in Alostar. And my grandfather was a man who was committed to God, and he did many things for people. It was not just that he was a headmaster, he was also an activist. And at that time, Indians were looking at, getting independence from the British. So he even brought Subhash Chandra Bose all the way to Malaysia. And, there was this movement. And he also formed the Kedah Indian Association. He was the first Secretary General. So why am I sharing this with you? Because if you look at my life, there's also a lot of activism. And my grandfather was an activist in many ways. My parents were also born in India. My father in Trivandrum district and my mother in Kollam district. And my father fell in love with my mother and married her and brought her to Malaysia. And I was born in 1961. And my mother had a lot of challenges getting a job, but there was a lack of stability in the first year. But it all ironed out in the second year of my life. And we settled in a place called Sungai Petani in Kedah. And actually our family flourished there. My mother was a church-goer, a person who was committed to God, and she was a daily mass goer. And I remember the days when I started as an altar server. I used to run after her because she would walk very fast. And that was the beginning of working within the church, being an altar server. I think many other Catholic men would have had the same experience. And God blessed me with many gifts, especially the gift of leadership. And I was head altar server from 1974 till 1976, and then I joined the Catholic Youth Fellowship of my parish. And I was elected president in 1978 until the middle of 1981, when I left Malaysia to come to Bangalore to study in St. John's Medical College. And that was where I started thinking about God. And I wanted God to be very much part of my life. And when I was in St. John's Medical College, I experienced a crisis in early 1982. And a nun who had come to Malaysia, to Bangalore for the National Charismatic Conference in St. Peter's Seminary, reached out to me and said, okay, I will introduce you to this man, Fritz Mascarenhas. And Fritz was very instrumental in bringing God into my life. So in November 1982, I went for a charismatic retreat preached by Fritz Mascarenhas and Father Robello. And that's where I had my renewal experience, my born-again experience, that God came into my life in a very strong way. And and these days, if you watch videos, TikToks, there are a lot of debates regarding religion and who possesses God. Sometimes in religion, we want to cage God. But, God is everywhere. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. And I believe that it is important to have experiential faith. And I always say this, experiential faith triumphs intellectual faith. And today we've got so many intellectual debates about God. But once we experience God, like the people in the early church, where they've allowed the Holy Spirit to come into their lives, our lives change and we encounter God. And I would say it began there. My walk with God, God walking with me. In 1983, three of us formed the St. John's Medical College prayer group, and that was very important. And it grew, many others joined, and initially we had a lot of challenges. You would think that in a Catholic medical college, a Catholic Christian medical college, you would have the vibrancy of faith, but the student community in the hostel put God in one compartment, and they would live their lives in other ways. So, of course, there were daily mass goers. So the prayer group played a very important role in bringing God into our community. So it grew. We had challenges. People criticized us and all that. But eventually, people said, if you want support, go to the prayer group. And I think this is so important. As a psychotherapist, support from others is essential for us to be mentally healthy. And this is where I experienced much support. Later, I was able to join the National Youth Pastoral Team of the Charismatic Renewal, which was started by Father Gino Hendricks. And there I met young people in youth ministry who were vibrant, who dedicated their lives to God. And I think one thing that struck me was many of them were educated, few of them had a PhD, and I realized from Father Gino that we need to use our knowledge and skills for the kingdom of God. And that has been my journey, acquiring knowledge, acquiring skills, acquiring experience in my work with people. So I thank my parents also for supporting me, because after I completed my internship in St. John's, they allowed me to stay on for full-time ministry. So it was with the NYPT, and I have preached and taught in the 4 major cities in South India in 1989. Trivandrum, I went there with Fritz Mascarenhas. It was a fantastic. You have heard Fritz, he's so good. We had a mission, a kind of day retreat for about 5 days, and the numbers just grew. People from different religions, Muslim students, Hindu students, they came when they heard about Fritz. And that was a fantastic experience, because these young people encountered God there. Yeah? I had to return to Malaysia in 1989, and I worked we had to work in government service. But the good thing was, I also belong to the parish of St. Michael's in Kedah, and they made me youth coordinator because of my work with youth. And that was challenging because you know that internship or housemanship requires a lot of time, a lot of dedication. Sometimes we work 36 hours in a stretch, but being part of the church community and youth ministry and being part of the prayer group was the way God supported me. I also took a detour and I joined the Jesuits for some time. I thought I was being called to be a priest, and that would be the ultimate dedication to God and service to God. Of course, I was socialized to the Jesuits in India. The Jesuit presence in India is very strong, you know? And that was a different experience of formation. I was with them for 9 months, and I was introduced to Ignatian spirituality, and actually I would suggest that everyone who is Catholic, Christian, make this Ignatian retreat. So it was one step further from the initial charismatic retreat, initiation retreat, or life in the spirit seminar where we encounter God. And the most important thing which is now part of my life is discernment of God's will. How do we know that we are doing God's will without discerning God's will? And Father Gino helped us with training us in discernment, but it was the Jesuits. They are the masters of discernment. And when I decided that priesthood was not my calling was towards my wife, Sharuna Varghese. She was from Hyderabad, but now, of course, she's a Malaysian permanent resident. And a lot of our work in Malaysia was jointly done, you know, my wife and I. So we worked with youth first, and later I went to do my postgraduate studies in the University of Malaya in the Greater Kuala Lumpur area. And I was always working a little bit within the church, despite the challenges of being a doctor, a medical doctor in government service. And at the end of my training in University Malaya, coincidentally, we attended a Jesuit parish, and I was asked to be on the board of directors for the counseling center. That was the first Christian Catholic counseling center in Malaysia. Emmaus Counseling Center in the parish of St. Francis Xavier in Petaling Jaya in Malaysia. And as I was treating patients, I found that just making diagnosis, treating them with medication is not enough. The holistic approach is so important to bring healing to people who had mental health challenges. So I yearned to be also a psychotherapist. And that was a different journey altogether. I could not find any of the senior professors to train me because none of them was certified trainers or supervisors, but they were therapists. So you need a further certification as a supervisor and a trainer. And I was asking God to give me an opportunity to be trained. And then in 2005, Professor Thambu Maniam was an elder also an elder in the Evangelical Church in the greater Kuala Lumpur area, brought in the World Congress of Psychotherapy. And I came into contact with two Australian, one clinical psychologist and one psychiatrist, and they were willing to train me in interpersonal psychotherapy. And that's another journey, because I wanted to do cognitive behavioral therapy or psychodynamic psychotherapy. We were trained in that during the training in psychiatry, but we were not certified. So I got this certification in interpersonal psychotherapy, and I realized that God had led me there. Because I am a relational person. For me, my relationship with God, with the people who God has put into my life, and also a relationship with myself is important. And this is what I talk about often. We need to have relationships with ourselves. Self-awareness, if you look at the Gospels, Jesus challenges us to reflect on life, right? And Jesus actually, if you look at the first and second commandments, it's about relationship, the triangular relationships with God, with others, and with self. And often we forget that we need to have relationship with self. So after I was certified, and my peers tell me that I was the first certified psychotherapist among psychiatrists in Malaysia, and I thank God for that, you know. So I was also influenced by the books by Father John Powell, a Jesuit priest, and the Father Matthew Lin, whom we have brought to Malaysia to do inner healing programs. And there I found that in the US, there is an association of Christian therapists. So I said, why not start that in Malaysia too? So now I'm a certified therapist because integrity is so important. Many people call themselves therapists, but actually they're not trained therapists. Okay? So I believe in the empowerment of people, especially empowerment of people who are marginalized. Okay? And what we did was in 2007, my wife had taken a break. She had done a lot of work on migration and health, and we have a UNHCR office in Malaysia. So my wife, who had worked with migrant workers in the area of HIV and AIDS, and then later she became a coordinator of a 9-country project, South Asia and Southeast Asia, including India. She took a break. She said, I need time for myself. And in prayer, I think that was a time of restoration for her. You know, God restored her. And then she said, hey, I want to volunteer. I want to work with refugees. So she went, who is now the head of the UN Human Rights section, you know, Mr. Volker Turk. Actually, you can Google him. And then he said, you know, Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, had left Malaysia. Then he said there's a vacuum in terms of working with refugees in the area of mental health. And he said, your husband is a psychiatrist. Why don't you all start your own NGO? And we started this NGO. I have to give my wife a lot of credit, called Health Equity Initiatives. So we are looking at health and human rights. And actually, many Christians are involved in human rights, the rights of people, social action. And this was something that we were called to. And we prayed about it, And God led us to refugees in Malaysia. So when we talk about health and human rights, we are talking also about creating access to health care, and here it's mental health care for the marginalized. People who find it difficult to access healthcare. In Malaysia, Malaysia has not recognized the International Convention for Refugees. So we have a lot of challenges. And my wife will always say, we started from the boots of our cars because we had no place. We started by visiting refugees on Sundays with our young son at that time. He is 22 now. He's 22. And then UNHCR gave us a grant to train refugees. So, I talked about empowering. So we wanted to empower the refugees to serve themselves, to serve their communities. And we started with the Myanmar refugees because they are the biggest number. And they still come to Malaysia. It's even worse now in Myanmar because there's a lot of abuse, torture, and even rape. So we are getting women who come with stories of trauma, of being sexually abused and raped. And so we trained, and that too, we had to thank the parish priest of Assumption Church in Petaling Jaya. He gave us the space free of charge to do the training. And we would train the refugees in mental health. So my wife and I developed a module in mental health to train the refugees to become community mental health workers. And many of these refugees, especially from Chin State and Kachin State, were Christians. But of course, you have a group who are also Buddhist. And that was our project. It was first project. It was so exciting to see it come into fruition. And it was blessed by God. And of course, I read something yesterday, I think, by Paulo Coelho. He says that if we have the will to initiate something, the universe is there to support us. So it includes God. So it actually flourished from there, and we were looking for a space. We had no space for our NGO. And my wife is a woman of prayer, and the rentals are quite high because KL is the biggest city in Malaysia. She prayed and she was led to a building. The owner was Christian. And thus we got a space where the rental was affordable. And then we got some funding from two embassies, the Finnish embassy and the Swiss embassy. So we could start our community work, a community center in Brickfields in Kuala Lumpur. And it just grew. It just grew. And we provide comprehensive mental health services. I think one of the things that has caught the attention of people in the refugee network internationally also, because we have attended international meetings on refugees, is our community mental health services. People going into the community. And it's just like us. God asks us to go on mission with people from different backgrounds. And this was really, I think we were blessed in giving service to the refugees, And I was teaching in several medical schools, and at that, the last medical school that I worked in was the Taylor's University School of Medicine, and I was head of psychiatry there. So I could develop my program for my students, and I would bring the medical students to see our refugee patients. And they were encouraged to write a reflection. And it was very clear that this was a mind-blowing experience for them. They had never met refugees. They had never met people who were poor, not only economically, but mentally, socially, and spiritually. So the good news to the poor is not just, socio-economic outreaches, but also here, as a psychiatrist, as a mental health professional, I've learned that people who have mental health challenges are psychologically poor. People who have mental health challenges are also socially and spiritually poor. And it was a blessing to work with these people. And we also have done a number of things. We worked with people who were managing trafficked women. And in fact, we had written a book. We developed a module to train the people who were in these centers where they kept trafficked women. Yeah? And most probably I'll present our book to this group. Yeah? We have had challenges. Our funding was from the US. At one time, we had 50 staff with us, and then we lost our funding last year after President Trump came in. Yeah? And so we had challenges last year. And we requested for donations, and friends and well-wishers donated. So we had to downsize by about 80%. We had only 20% of our staff. And so this year would be a challenge for us in continuing to provide this service to refugees. Yeah? So that's our work with refugees. We were led there, as I shared. We were led to work with refugees. 20 years ago, I have not thought of refugees at all. And we also work on the rights for refugees. So we have had meetings with the government, and now the UNHCR has helped refugees get some kind of access to healthcare in the government hospitals. Yeah? So we also work with the government people in the hospitals. Now, the next part of my sharing would be with the Catholic counselors and therapists of Malaysia. So we have run workshops. We even had, even organized a national conference in 2019 before the COVID pandemic on the prevention of suicide. We know that globally, we have a mental health pandemic. People are only realizing it now, slowly. For instance, in Malaysia, the National Morbidity Study has shown that 1 out of 3.5 people in Malaysia have experienced mental health challenges, mental health disorders. And what is alarming is it's also happening among the children. And 1 out of 5 children from the age of 5 to 15 in Malaysia also have had mental health issues. So the government have been proactive, trying to do as much as possible to help its citizens. Yeah? So that also has led me to pray, to reflect, what more can we do? So, being a member of the International Society of Interpersonal Psychotherapy, I attend these conferences. And then I heard that people with very little health or mental health training have been trained as community workers in countries in South America, Africa, and Asia. I think the famous person who pushed this agenda was Professor Vikram Patel. Now, Vikram Patel is a professor of psychiatry in Harvard University. And he wrote a book, Where There Are No Psychiatrists. And he has a big project in Goa. And he has been instrumental in promoting this idea. So I was praying about it. I said, why not we do the same kind of training or similar kind of training in Malaysia? So my team from the Catholic counselors and therapists of Malaysia sat together, and I said, let's look at training Christians, Catholics, because I've done training also for non-Catholic Christian groups. I worked last year with the Anglican Bishop of West Malaysia, Peninsular Malaysia, to do a little bit of. I was a guest lecturer for the program in the Masters of Divinity, and there were pastors and people working in ministry who were there. So as a continuation, he's looking at me replicating the community mental health training with his group of people. So this community mental health training was for people, ordinary people who are dedicated to God and who wanted to do more. We had challenges in the beginning. In 2024, we tried gathering people together. It didn't work. So a lot of prayer, discernment. How do we get this training going? And then I was contacted by Joe Prakasam and his wife Anita Prakasam, who are with the Family Life Commission of the KL Archdiocese. He said, Dr. Xavier, can you run mental wellness programs? So I said to myself, this is God opening a door to us. So we conducted the mental wellness program in May 2025, and there was very good response. The hall was packed, but I had a further agenda. Sometimes I call myself a cunning Malayali, because I look for opportunities to start things. And so that was the first part of the training. 2 days, and then we offered the group of people who came there for the training this opportunity to be trained as community mental health workers. So after those 2 days of training, a further 2 days of training, and then Zoom training too. And now we have the first cohort of people. We have initiated the first community mental health ministry in Malaysia. And we hope to grow in this ministry. So this year, the people who have been trained there, we are going to focus on young people. We are going to go into the parishes, and our target group are the teenagers, 15, 16, 17, and we are just going to start with stress and stress management workshops, because our young people are very stressed. Yeah? And So we pray that this will come into fruition this year. I think I'll end my sharing and open up to questions. Thank you for listening to me.